Hi, welcome to Left Foot Media. My name is Brendan Malone. Well, ever since the election of Donald Trump, in fact, probably even before the election of Donald Trump, and particularly in the last couple of weeks, probably to do with the March for Life, there have been a lot of people claiming that if you are pro-birth, and only pro-birth, you are not really pro-life. Now, some of you might be scratching your heads and saying, what do you mean pro-birth? What are you actually talking about? Well, let me read to you now a meme that has been doing the rounds, which is someone's taken a statement that was made by a Catholic nun, Sister Joan Chittister, and they've turned it into a meme, and a lot of people have been passing this around, and this sums up this concept of being pro-birth but not pro-life. And what I want to do is I want to read it to you, and then I'm going to explain to you why this is completely fallacious, why this is a totally false assertion, and why it lacks all logical validity. I do not believe that just because you're opposed to abortion, that makes you pro-life. In fact, I think in many cases your morality is deeply lacking if all you want is a child born, but not a child fed, not a child educated, not a child housed. And why would I think that you don't? Because you don't want any tax money to go there. That's not pro-life, that's pro-birth. So basically, in a nutshell, what she's suggesting is that if you are opposed to abortion and you want to see babies born, but you don't support other initiatives like, say, free healthcare or paid maternity leave or, cheap housing and accommodation, that you are not really pro-life. You are just what she calls pro-birth. 3 reasons why this is a completely absurd argument and why it lacks all logical validity. Number 1, I've been involved in actively working in the pro-life arena for more than 12 years now, and I've met pro-lifers from all around the world. I am yet, and I've met a lot of them, I am yet to meet a single pro-lifer who actually fits this caricature. I have not met a single one. I have met pro-lifers who might have disagreements about how certain policies, like say around welfare or around low-income housing or education, they've had disagreements about how they should be enacted and outworked. But I have not met a single pro-lifer who has said and thought that people shouldn't be looked after and cared for. In fact, interestingly enough, it is not pro-choice people who are actually running crisis pregnancy centres and volunteering their time and putting their hard-earned wages towards donating towards those centres and giving of clothes or taking pregnant women in need into their homes. It's pro-life people who are doing it. In fact, it's the very pro-birth people she is talking about who do that kind of thing. This is a false caricature. It does not represent any pro-lifer at all, I don't think. It's just not realistic. It's someone's idea. In fact, it's the sort of caricature that was invented by the pro-choice movement to try and shut down legitimate debate. And they thought that if they could make you look cold and heartless, then that would somehow win the argument. It's just absurd. It's not this is not what a real pro-lifer actually looks like. Now, I'm not saying that there might not be some pro-lifers out there in the world who are actually just opposed to abortion and want to see babies born, but, heartlessly and coldly don't support people actually being cared for after they've been born. But even if that was the case, let me explain to you why that still doesn't mean that they're not actually pro-life. And that brings me to my second point. What Sister Joan and this concept does is it confuses 2 very different things, 2 very different types of things. She is comparing right to life issues, such as abortion, with quality of life issues, such as education, affordable housing, paid maternity leave. They are quality of life issues. They are things which affect the quality of a person's life. Now, I think everyone who is a good person and a humane person, I think most people genuinely are like this, even if it's if it's just within their own circle of friends and family. They actually want people to have a good quality of life. They don't want to see anyone suffer or to have a horrible experience of life. But those issues still are quality of life issues, but abortion is not merely a quality of life issue. Abortion is a right to life issue because abortion is an act which denies an innocent human being their most fundamental and important right, the right to life. Abortion is an act which deliberately kills an innocent human being. It is the first and most important principle of human ethics, do no harm. The right to life is the first and most important principle of social justice, of human rights, because if you're not alive, you don't get to experience any of those other quality of life issues. If you're not alive, you don't get any of your other human rights. That's why the right to life issues are so fundamental. They are the first principles. And what she's suggesting here is that if you don't equate quality of life issues, which while important are secondary to the first and foundational and most important principle of all, the right to life, then you're somehow not being pro-life. That's quite frankly is absurd. And it becomes even more absurd when you realize that unlike right to life issues, which are actually black and white, quality of life issues are very nuanced and there is a lot of grey. For example, on right to life issues, it's a pretty simple question that needs to be answered. Does this action deliberately end the life of an innocent human being? Yes or no? And if it does deliberately end the life of an innocent human being, then it is not a morally good action. It is a violation of social justice and we shouldn't be doing it, right? That's as simple as it gets. But on quality of life issues, there are lots of nuance and grey areas and debate. For example, how should we actually execute this idea of housing everyone in our society? Who's going to pay for these policies? Can we afford it? Do we have the resources to do it? Is there a better way of doing it? So for example, some people might say, I think the state should give paid maternity leave. Other people should say, no, the state shouldn't give paid maternity leave, but what it should do is make the economy so efficient that people are getting paid more and therefore they're able to live off one income when they have children and mum doesn't have to rush back to work. Other people might say, well, I disagree with both of you. I think what the state should do is give tax breaks in all sorts of other areas to people every time they have a child. So all of a sudden, the economic pressures are not as great and they are once again able to have mum stay at home. So there's three different concepts there that are all trying to solve the same problem. And no one concept is necessarily any worse, and certainly no one concept is wrong while the others are right. They're all just different expressions of trying to fix a quality of life issue. So to compare quality of life with right to life issues is not a valid or good way of doing things. And lastly, and this is the most important point of all, this argument is a major logical fallacy, because if you are pro-life, then you automatically are pro-birth. And if you are pro-birth, you are automatically pro-life. If you believe that a person should not be killed before they are born, and you believe that every person, even if they're in a womb, has the right to life and has the right to have their fundamental human right respected and not taken away from them, even if you don't care about what happens to them after birth, you're still pro-life. You are pro their right to life. Let me give you another analogy, completely different scenario, to show you why this claim that Sister Joan is making is so absurd and why it is completely, from a logical perspective anyways, completely false. Let's imagine that you are at a swimming hole with a group of friends and you see a child fall into the water and they begin drowning, they begin struggling. They're not quite underwater yet, they're struggling to keep their head above water, and you know that they are about to start drowning. But here's the thing, you're not a strong swimmer yourself and you can't really reach them. You know you're going to need other people to help you because you don't have the power to solve this problem all by yourself. So you turn to the people beside you who are chatting away and haven't noticed, and you say, there is a child in the water over there, they're drowning. We need to save this child. We need to stop this child from drowning. We need to do everything we can right now to try and save this child's life. What do you think would happen if one of those people in that group turned around and said to you, oh, okay, sure. You're all pro this child being pulled out of the water. You know, you're pro this child not drowning. But do you really care about what happens to this child after we've pulled it out of the water? Do you want to pay for its lunch? Do you want to pay for its education? Do you want to make sure this child's mother is looked after and has affordable housing? If you don't, you're not really pro-life. Now, if someone responded to that situation in that way, we would rightly say that person was being irrational, and not only that, they were not being humane. They were doing the exact opposite of humanism in that situation. And the same is true with what Sister Joan Chittister is doing here. She is not being humane, she's not being logical, she's being irrational. This whole argument is irrational. Because if a person comes to you and says there are people here, innocent human beings, who are dying, they are being deliberately killed, we've got to do something to try and stop this. We've got to care for their mothers. We've got to be a voice on this issue. We've got to support crisis pregnancy centres. We've got to get out on the street and make people aware of how serious this is. We've got to talk to other people around us so they understand the truth of the ethical issues involved. And your response to that person is to say, well, hold on a minute. What are you going to do for that child after it's not killed? Because I don't think you really are pro-life if you're not going to do X, Y, and Z for the child after you've saved it from being killed. That is an absolutely absurd proposition. Yes, we should care about quality of life issues, but quality of life issues are not right to life issues. Quality of life issues are not fundamental in first principles. The first principle, the first and most important right of all is the right to life. And that's why we give priority to that child being born. And a person who is pro a child being born, regardless of what they think should happen to that child after birth, is a person who is pro-life because they believe that that child should not be deliberately killed. They believe that an innocent human being has the right not to be killed. And that is the very definition of what it means to be pro-life. So next time someone tries to use this ridiculous argument on you, make sure that you fire those 3 points back at them because they're really not thinking straight about this issue. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time on Left Foot Media.